Welcome, everybody. Oh, it's wonderful to see all of you. Welcome. This is the Edgewalker Cafe on June 27th, 2024. And our topic today is the many shades of joy. And my very special guest is Prasad.
What kind of revenue are they bringing in?
I ask that you mute when you come in, please. Thank you. Good to see everybody. So, all right, we're letting folks in. And the way we will be going today is that Prasad and I are going to start a conversation that's actually a continuation of a conversation that he and I have been having for a while. It's actually hard to say, Prasad, when that conversation started, but it's definitely an ongoing conversation, more specifically focusing on joy lately. And so we'll get into that conversation and be doing that for about a half hour. And then we're going to open it up for you to join in the conversation. Although you're always welcome to put things in the chat, ideas and thoughts you want to share with others or questions. And then in a half hour, we'll open it up. So first, I would like to introduce Prasad, and Prasad will open our space with a chant. And it's actually hard to give a bio of Prasad because he is what I would call a Renaissance man. He has a corporate background of having worked with Apple and then consulting to CEOs and many, many companies and leaders, both for-profit and nonprofit, for decades. And he's an author and wrote a best-selling book called From Smart to Wise, Acting and Leading with Wisdom, that has just a wonderful way of switching the consciousness from, particularly based on his work in Silicon Valley and with tech leaders, shifting that consciousness from being the smartest one in the room and that whole sense of controlling through your brilliance to the wisdom and the interconnectedness that comes from a spiritual path. And he's a co-founder of the Institute of Indic Wisdom that I'm on the advisory board for. And he is on my advisory board for the Global Consciousness Institute. And so we support each other. And I see some people, Prasad, from our shared advanced awakening inner presence course that Prasad and others taught last year. So it's Anand, for instance, it's wonderful to see you. And so our paths have been interweaving for a long time. And also there's some folks here from Fetzer Scholars. So I wanted to point out that Prasad worked with Fetzer Institute for a long time and is closely aligned with Fetzer Institute's mission and vision of creating a loving world that works for all. I could go on because there's so many accomplishments and organizational connections, but I'd rather now have you meet Prasad and experience his wonderful, joyful, loving wisdom. So Prasad, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Sister Judi, because that is how I feel you have been for past 20 plus years that we met. I think in Academy of Management, I do believe we met Andre Delbecq and others have introduced. So since first time I met you, I felt like there is a lot of joy and love that I experience when I'm with you. It feels like you take whatever is happening with a certain sense of grace, with acceptance, and equanimity, if I could use that word. So I find being with you and dialoguing with you is something I look forward to any day, anytime. So thank you for creating this opportunity for me. And I am grateful for all of you who have joined. Some of you are old friends, and I recognize and I acknowledge you, and I'm looking forward to meeting the new friends. And thank you, Ellis. Also, nice to see you on this session. So, however you want to take this flow, Judi, I'm yours.
Thank you so much, my brother Prasad. So would you open our sacred space with a chant, as you had done in our Awakening Inner Presence course, and you'll know exactly what to do and what to share.
Thank you. Oh. Anando Brahmeti Vyajanat Anandadyeva Kalvimani Bhutani Jayanti Anandena Jatani Jivanti Yat Prayancha Visham Vishanti Ti Tadvignaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. What it means is, in a old ancient Upanishadic story, a son went to father to understand the nature of self and the nature of reality. And the father guided him through series of exercises where he would explore not having any food or water for some time, what happens to his consciousness, and then controlling his senses, starting with the body, breath, joy, and his thinking and his decision making. He kept coming back, asking for what else is at the root of our consciousness, what is the nature of reality. And when it comes to joy, he just recognizes that the world is created from joy. Anando Brahmeti Vyajanat. The whole universe is created out of joy. Whether it is the joy of the mother and the father creating the baby in the womb, or whether it is universe coming out of expression of the consciousness, joyful expression, out of that universe is created. It is not created out of anger, but out of joy that the universe comes into existence. And when we are able to experience pleasure, joy, happiness from each other, that the universe actually prospers and maintains itself. So the way in which we propagate and we experience and we express ourselves in a positive, creative way is the one that sustains the universe. And then when we die, when we complete our journey, our body and whatever is remaining becomes food for other, living beings of different nature. They could be insects in the ground, or they could be something else, but we become the food for somebody else and bring joy to somebody else. So that means what sustains the universe is the joy. And once the son hears that, he becomes self-realized and he goes away. He never goes back to ask Father of finding more about nature of reality, because he experiences the nature of reality and the oneness with it through joy. So that is what the chant that I just did means.
Thank you so much. What a perfect way to open our space together. So I wanted to begin by sharing a story about joy that really changed my trajectory, and it wasn't always easy. Um, I had for years been running the Center for Spirit at Work and working at a university full time and raising two children and writing books and working really hard. And you mentioned Andre Delbecq, and one point I went to Andre and talked to him about how challenging it was to do all I was doing, and some of the suffering I was experiencing, because he had expressed a similar suffering in his own life. And so at that time, a friend mentioned that there was a position open at Golden Gate University, and he wanted me to apply for that position. That's Lee Robbins had asked me to do that. So I applied for the position, was interviewing, and really enjoyed the people I met, felt like I could really bring my work on spirituality in the workplace to that university, love San Francisco, but also was taken around by a real estate agent to see where I might want to live and how that might all work. And that was a challenge, because what they were paying was rather difficult to live on in San Francisco, which is true for any organization paying any amount. And so on the airplane home, I was having my conversations with the universe, with Source, as I often did. And my question, whenever I had a decision to make, was always, like my prayer was always, please tell me how I can be more of service, taking this job, because it was clear they were going to offer me the job, or staying where I am. And I heard this cosmic laughter. It was like warm, embracing thunder, this laughter. And then the words in my head, but they kind of exploded, were, do what brings you joy. And I was so stunned that I actually went into a bit of a depression over the next month or two, because I did not know what brought me joy. I had lost all contact with joy. Everything was about service. Being of service brought me joy, but that wasn't the framing. The framing was just serve, and which you can get very depleted doing. But when I was told, do what brings you joy, I had to start paying attention to where is joy? What brings me joy? And over time, that really shifted who I was and how I am in the world. And it is a guiding principle now. And so in our conversations, Prasad, I have been expanded because you are looking at many facets of joy. I was like, just joy, Joy, one unitary concept, feeling, guiding point. But there's, in the Vedanta, there's so much more subtlety about the emotions and the ways of being. And so part of this conversation today is to share some of what you're learning about these many shades of joy. So I want to turn it back over to you and see where you want to take this.
Thank you, Judy. Yeah, I relate to what you said. Do what makes you joyful. I used to mistake when somebody says, do what gives you joy. I used to mistake pleasure to be joy. So first I thought, oh, I should do what I like to do because this is what I want, or this is what I enjoy. This is what gives me happiness. over time, when I reflected on it, I found out, like, eating my favorite food, like this morning, it looks like mangoes for breakfast, is something that gives me a lot of joy, because I could find an Indian store which shipped mangoes from India, a particular kind I used to eat when I was growing up. That gives me a lot of joy. But then I realized that joy is temporary, because it gives me pleasure while I'm eating and for certain amount of time, but that pleasure is not compared to the pleasure of, seeing so many wonderful people whom I know from before, and some of them, like Amy, I haven't seen for a while. So like that, when I see people whom I come across, suddenly it's like you feel your heart is lifting you to another level. There is a exuberance that you feel, and there is a word for it. So I found out that while we talk about happiness or joy, these are two words that we use in English majority of the times, and we talk about happiness and pursuit of happiness as one of our constitutionally, you know, uh, given, something, freedom, pursuit of joy, or some things that we go after, the three things that we really cherish. When I look at the Indic wisdom, Indian knowledge, body of eternal wisdom, as I think about, there are so many words in expressing joy. So for a moment, when I did some inquiry, I could find 13 words in Sanskrit that express joy, and I spent time looking at what do those mean, and can I really relate to them and connect with them. And so I was, the ullasam is the exuberant joy when I find, beautiful sunsets, or if I see some unexpected people, and then there is it lights up as if I saw some stars in the sky, I, without even knowing, my face just lights up and their face lights up. So there are ways of experiencing, fun, joy, pleasure, happiness. And, like sometimes, recently, I found that my friend was sick, and I happened to take him to the hospital. And when we spent like several hours going through various tests. And at the end of that, the doctor came out and said, everything is good, nothing to be concerned about. The relief and the joy that my friend experienced, because she has been concerned about all these symptoms, the way in which that person was, it was a completely different kind of a joy. So I am thinking that by learning various words and various kinds of joy, various levels of happiness that we feel, if we can bring it into the vocabulary and learn to experience these, maybe our range of emotional experience and emotional intelligence and our relationship with both ourselves and others could expand beyond what we have done before.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And it reminds me of Mel Toomey, who was a dear friend and co-author of
Yeah.
mine, and you know him. Um, he talked about what mastery was. And
Mhm.
mastery is being able to make distinctions And I think about, I rented a room once to a former student from Japan, and he decided he wanted to learn about coffee now that he was in the United States. So he would buy different kinds of water, different kinds of coffee, different kinds of filters, and use different kinds of methods for making coffee, and would really pay attention to his experience of these different coffees. I mean, it was this kind of, in a way, a scientific experiment, but it was also a very presence, experiential way of being. And I was just so inspired by his making these distinctions of what gave him the very best experience of coffee. And so, and it's the like in the Tao, they talk about when you name things, you're making distinctions. The one becomes the 10,000 things. So when we can make distinctions about joy and say, well, this is a joy that I feel this in this place in my body, that, and it's because of the sunset or seeing a friend, that's one kind of joy. If there's the joy of sitting under a tree and actually feeling like the tree is talking to you, that oneness, that interconnection is a totally different kind of joy. And so in English, we don't have words for that. But in Sanskrit, you're saying there are words for that. And so the naming of them helps us to have distinctions and then help us have more mastery. And I would think, I'm just hypothesizing here because I don't know those names. I would think that would actually make us more joyful because we'd be paying attention to joy.
Yeah, you said it very nicely, Judy. Because, I don't drink coffee or tea, but whenever I go anybody's house or whenever I meet them, they want to know whether I want to have coffee or tea or herbal tea, or sometimes if they are from India or UK, they say, do you want to have Bornvita or Ovaltine or Ragi malt? There are a variety of drinks they want to offer, but it is not the drink that they offer that is important, but sharing a drink. It is like having a drink in the morning. Of course, the kind of drinks will differ if we are meeting in the evening before dinner, but ultimately it all comes down to not the drink, but sharing it, sharing the pleasure of being with each other. And that is what I think is the most important. And second thing that comes to my mind when you say that, I suppose, like I was in Anchorage a few days ago, actually I should say a few years ago to be more accurate. And the person who looked out, I was planning to go for a hike. It was early summer, and she looked outside and said, I don't think this is a conducive weather for you to hike. There was ice out there was some snow out there, but she could see the subtle distinctions of how it looked like. And so I was surprised. I said, look, it all looks same to me. She said, I'm a transplant from the mainland, but the native people here in Alaska, they talk about 25 words to describe the ice or sleet or snow. And then I remembered that somebody else also mentioned, for a shepherd, there are so many kinds of sheep. They can tell what it is. That is because somehow when you are actually experiencing joy, then you create a scale and you create subtle kind of distinctions. And from that context, I look back, why is that in Sanskrit or in our lexicon, we have so many words for happiness? I realized that the Hindu tradition, no, now we call it a Hindu religion, but when I grew up, we talk about it not like a religion, but as a way in which we experience life, a Hindu way of life, if you want to call it, or a Indic way of life, because some of these are not just Hindu, they are also shared by Buddhists and they are also shared by Jain. So you can call it more region specific, Indic way. I found these are all words where we experience joy. For example, when you go to church or a temple or a masjid, or when you go to a place of worship, you get the offering at the end of the session which you have. Then that is called prasadam. Prasad, actually, which, by the way, my name came out of because in Indian context, I was the first son for my parents, and I have uh, two other brothers and two other sisters. So they looked at me as the first son, as a gift from their family God. So it was the blessings of the divine that allowed them to have a child, conceive and have a child, because there are so many people who want to have children, but they cannot. So my name was Prasad or Prasadam. And then I looked at it and said, how is this connected with joy? I found out peace of mind achieved by divine grace. So it is a happiness that when you experience the divine grace and acknowledge that you have been touched by a higher power, it's a transcendental joy that cannot be replicated by any world experience, any worldly experience. So prasad means to share something that you received by grace or from grace. So that was one word that came in. So similarly, I found out that when you suddenly, see something, you are surprised by something. Like, this morning, there was a overcast sky. Just as we are about to start the session, a few minutes ago, there was a bright sunlight came out of the clouds, and it was like a bursting forth, the sunlight, and that was called harsham. Harsha means sudden joy, sudden burst of joy that fills my heart is called harsham. So like that, like when I mentioned about eating a mango for breakfast, there is a sukham is the word that describes the happiness derived by physical or mental well-being. So, sitting in this morning, a sense of contentment I feel arising from a healthy body, healthy mind, and that emotion, is connected with motivation somehow. So I can go on, but there are, you have seen the link on LinkedIn that talks about different words. But what it comes down to is we can experience happiness in multiple ways. We don't have to be limited by it. More we have distinctions, those distinctions allow us to communicate something to each other. So if we have more words to describe our happiness and joy, more we can share with each other the subtle and the specific experience of happiness that we are feeling from each other. And that's what was made me to write about it and research into different words that are expressed in Sanskrit.
So one of the things I hear you saying is the language allows us to share our joy, the distinctions, and I'm, I think of my own experience, and when I share joy, others, it lifts them up. It increases their joy. So it's a way of amplifying joy through sharing. And sharing itself, like you were saying, would you like a cup of tea? I want to share tea with you. That's the sharing is a form of joy
Yeah.
by bringing joy to others. So this just keeps amplifying itself, and that could save the world.
Yeah, I certainly believe that it could save the world. Not only it can save the world, it can save ourselves, because whenever we are joyful, the kind of chemicals that are neurotransmitters, whether it is dopamine or serotonin or whether norepinephrine or adrenaline, all of these kinds of chemicals that are generated primarily in the brain, but people are discovering they are also generated throughout the body and even in the gut. The gut microbes are some things that a lot of people are beginning to talk about. The brain in the stomach, as they call it. When you look at these kinds of things, it allows us to experience emotions much more deeply, meaningfully, and when there is a laughter, there is a sudden expression of exuberance and joy. And when I, feel good about something, these kinds of sharing goodness, sharing joy seems to have a lot about the well-being and health of the person who is joyful, and the infectiously spreads those through mirror neurons, and other people who are directly in the presence of that joy can also experience uplifting spirit. And I think so, you are right. These are sharing joy and what you call communicating that we are good. It's like all is well. I think that's the message we are giving to each other.
Mhm. And, in today's environment, I mean, I think today is, the debate happens tonight and the Supreme Court decisions are coming out. And I think about the anxiety I feel every time I hear a decision, or the anticipation of conflict and negative conversation tonight when Trump and Biden speak. And I hear about elections in other countries. It's like, I get more and more tense. And I do find that in many social situations, we share that anxiety. We share our fears, and we get our guts and our minds, our hearts all filled with those less than healthy hormonal things going around in our body and the brain chemistry. But when you talk about laughter, I was thinking about something I read when I was writing Edgewalkers. And I read this book called Survival: Who Lives and Who Dies. And it talked about different, very challenging life and death situations. And one of the findings was, like, let's say an example was a cave had collapsed. People were miners and they were in the cave, and their way out had been cut off. And there was a group that was surviving, but they were running out of air. And the leader of the group kept joking. He kept creating these, kind of dark humor situations and laughing. And he saved the group because they were willing to hang on, because there was this trust that developed, this sense of hope that developed, and that well, actually, what the book says is when you have laughter, the corpus callosum lights up. The right brain and the left brain are much more interconnected. You're just smarter. And so the group was able to be smarter about how to survive. And so I think about from your book, From Smart to Wise, and where like laughter and joy are part of the intelligence is kind of what I'm putting together in the moment from things you're saying.
I agree. I love what you are saying. And I think the way in which we experience joy, even like our discussion seems to emerge, like, we are having discussion in two channels. One is the communication like this, and then the chat is lighting up. And I think I love that, like Leo brought up so many words about joy and happiness that are in English language. We do have multiple words to experience joy in different way. As other people are saying, whether it is in Judaism or whether it is in different religious traditions, spiritual traditions, and even in poetry and the haikus, as we are seeing, joy is living, joy is flourishing, joy is sharing, and joy is experiencing something together so that it lights up the world. And so I think the joy seems to have inherent connection to love. Just as I'm talking about, like I see Dinesh putting up saying, like, if we can all feel the joy and love flowing from our hearts to all other people's hearts who are present here, can we experience a collective joy? I'm sure we can. And I'm sure as we are talking, we can bring it to each other and feel as if all our hearts are resonating with the happiness of sharing the same space at the same time. And, we can keep our eyes open, hearts open, and experience as if we are getting the love and joy from each of you. To me, I'm just feeling that. I have a feeling that will amplify uh, not only the Zoom session, but also probably the world in some respects, because people found when we are joyful, we are present in the moment. When we are present and when we are mindful, that means we are experiencing life in full as it is available, and that opens us to the larger consciousness that we are all part of, not as me as Prasad or you as Judi or somebody else, but we transcend the identity and the individual limitations and the pains that I am going through or somebody else is going through. We transcend those. And that ability to experience collectively is something that is very, very powerful. And of course, as somebody asked, the shadow of the joy, is something that when we can embrace both the shadow and the light, it actually makes the power of happiness and joy to be even more meaningful and more important to me.
And thank you for bringing in the other people who are on this call and those who wanted to be on the call and those who will be in the recording and watch that. We're expanding now. So I do want to open it up to those who are sharing and who have questions or comments. And also to let you know that let all of you know, if you want to save the chat, there are 3 dots on the upper right-hand corner that if you click on those, and I would do that right before you leave the call, so you get the full chat, but that will allow you to save the chat because there's some wonderful quotes and questions and
Yes.
so on. So let's open it up, and you can either raise your physical hand or raise your virtual hand through, what's it called at the bottom now? They keep changing this. The oh, I can't find it. The react button, and there's a little heart. So either one. But who
Yeah,
would
there's a
like to
raise a
jump into this
hand button
conversation?
there. Sorry, when you click on reactions, there's a raise a hand at the bottom button. Yeah.
Yeah. Should be able to raise it. Or we're a small enough group, you can just jump in and say whatever you want.
As people are waiting to raise the hands, there is a question I just saw on the chat. Janelle says, what connection do you see and or experience between joy and hope? I do believe hope shows the path and joy is being on the path. Hope opens the door and happiness allows us to experience the room. And I think hope and optimism are both very important and subtle differences. I think, Judi, if you remember our friend from Minnesota, he talked about HERO, the acronym. He talked about the capital that we can build on: hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism. Representing HERO, the hope that today is better than yesterday. And efficacy, like I am confident to deal with today. I have what it takes to experience both the shadow and the light that I am experiencing in my life. And I trust that I have what it takes is efficacy. And sometimes the universe doesn't give what we want. We fall, we fail, we struggle. But knowing that I can learn from the failure, I can learn from what did not go right, is the resilience to learn from the failures. Then optimism that I am better today because of what happened to me. And I am optimistic that my life going forward is, something that I'm going to enjoy. And whatever I do today, I am optimistic that it will make, at least our room to be better place, and it can be a little bit more reflective and bring a smile on each other's face. If we can be thinking in that way, then we are building this capital of a completely different nature. It is not the what you might call the physical capital or a financial capital, but it brings different levels of what is needed for our heart and for each other to grow and prosper intellectually and spiritually.
Well, and that makes me wonder what our basic belief is about the universe and reality. And I was really blessed to be a student of Jack Gibb, who wrote all about trust. And he wrote a book that never got published called The Universe is My Friend. And I saw the manuscript, and he would talk about going on walks in the woods with his friend, the universe, and the idea that the universe is a friendly place. And so I think our basic belief about the nature of reality is that it's a place, a source of joy, that there is joy to be had, that it's in us, it's in our circumstances, and that it's really, yeah. Okay, Janelle, jump in here, please.
Oh, let me lower my hand. Firstly, hello, Prasad, and hello, Judi. And it's so wonderful to be a part of this conversation. Thank you for addressing my question. And I will share that I had a little bit of an ulterior motive in asking it, which you actually went right into. I'm currently working on a book chapter on organizational change thought leadership. And I keep coming back to this idea of the type of thought leadership that we need for today's world and the future needs to have a component of hope in it to be able to counter the fear that our reptilian brains just bring about change in general. And now you've got me thinking about, okay, so it's not just hope, it is this vibratory sequence of seeing the path being on the path, seeing the path being on the path, hope, joy. And Josh earlier in the chat has asked a beautiful question that kind of ties into dichotomies. And I hope you get to address that. I'm curious, can I extend my question a little bit further? How do you see joy relating to successful organizational transformation? And if that's beyond the scope of this, I totally understand, but I'd be curious to see where this goes. Thank you.
Very good question. I would look at it that when we are building an organization, when we are part of an organization where there is joy, like there used to be a television show a long time ago. It is called Cheers. You know, people are happy that you came and they know your name. I think there is something about where you go every day to work and they're happy to see you and they greet you and they are willing to share what's on their mind instead of, you know, being very formal, very kind of stoic kind of thing. There is some experience of anticipation and of joy. I love to go to work every day instead of the situation where people used to say Monday mornings are the highest times when people die of heart attacks. Why? Because people have to go to work on Monday morning kind of scenario. So what it gives me a sense of is if we can bring happiness and the play, certain playfulness, which brings out both positive and negative. It challenges our conditioned mind. You know, like I might be naturally a serious person. I get, I sit at this dining table, which I have taken over after my kids left. And I sit at the dining table and I can watch the TV all the way across. And then when my wife is around, or if she's puttering around in kitchen, or if we can sit down and share some, a drink or a food or something like that, sometimes she comes to me and says, Prasad, stop being so serious. And she even holds this ones and says, lift them up and say, this is laughter. Don't be so serious. The world is not on your shoulders. You know, for a moment, it breaks my concentration, but I do find that disruption in my concentration is exactly what is needed. So there is something about an organizational transformation to take place. We cannot transform the organization by seriousness of what needs to get done, what is the vision, what is the strategy that we need to adopt so that we can do. But the ability to go through the ebb and flow, like Chakri pointed out, any experience of deep and meaningful joy sometimes requires a large amount of pain. like a childbirth. But if I focus on the pain of the childbirth, I don't think many women would like to have children at all. But there are several times once they experience the joy of the child growing up and, bringing the joy, sometimes, I wonder why they are ready to have another child after going through such a, like 20-hour labor pain for my wife for the first child. But she was open to having a second kid. So there is something about joy doesn't mean it is only positive, ignoring the negative. It is embracing the wholeness of front of the hand, back of the hand. As a matter of fact, our experience of happiness is enhanced when we are open to looking at the pain and the suffering. Of course, like Josh might be able to correct me if I'm right. According to the Jewish wisdom, pain is, inevitable, but suffering is optional. I think one of the Jewish scholars had mentioned it, if I'm right. So the idea is that just because we are hopeful and optimistic, the world will not necessarily give us only joy and not negativity. Actually, like even there are several colleagues from Institute of Indic Wisdom, and prominently I want to bring up Raghu Anantanarayan, who was the co-founder of Institute of Indic Wisdom. He talks about Navarasas. That means 9, 8 plus 1, I should say, because 1 is the equanimity. All experiences, the rasa means the flow of emotion. Experiencing all emotions, the 9 rasas, 9 emotions, primary emotions, of course, in partnership with them, as the movie The Inside Out, the number 2 has talked about the secondary emotions, but the primary emotion seems to be 8 plus 1, 9. I think experiencing all of them expands our consciousness to be with all of its boundaries. So that means we can experience the universe when we experience all the emotions. And so joy is an extremely important one, but the sorrow and other things also connect with it. So organizational transformation, if I were to complete it saying, instead of leading from what doesn't work, instead of focusing on what doesn't actually help, appreciative inquiry, because my feeling is what you appreciate appreciates. What you depreciate disappears. So if we take that as a basic tenet for bringing organizational change, working with appreciation, working with a positive, that's why the positive psychology and positive organizational scholarship has got so much of relevance and meaning going forward, rather than the clinical, just the facts, ma'am. I look at the body and I look at you on the bed with the cancer. I think you have 2 months to live. I can tell you out of 50 years of my medical experience, there is no way you are going to live more than 2 months. You know what? That doesn't need to be said. But if you were to say, if you can enjoy the next 2 months, I have a feeling your life will be so much better. Same communication. Experience the joy for next 2 months. Let us see what happens. Then you are opening up to the possibility of what could happen. So a transformation of self comes from disrupting how and what happens and bringing an ability to include the wholeness of life, wholeness of the organization, and the richness of everything together. that allows things to flourish rather than diminish.
Thank you. We have, actually, I don't know if Julia disappeared, but Julia had her hand up and Dinesh has his hand up and Josh may want to jump in. So I would love to hear from each of you, and that will make us go over a little bit because we also just have a few announcements. But let's, if that's okay with everybody, we'll continue on. And is Julia here? Julia, did you want to jump in?
Yes, can you hear me, Judy?
Yes,
Can you hear me?
yes. Can you hear us?
Wonderful. I'm in the car. Please forgive me.
Mhm.
Yes,
Go ahead.
and thank you, Prasadji. Thank you, Prasadji, for your words of wisdom. And Judy, something you said before Janelle's question, I believe, was something about how we believe the universe is about it way before. And then Prasad kind of just now talked about how the goal might be to experience the non-duality of the universe, the disconnects and the resonance, and you know, the idea that pain is required, but suffering is optional, or something like that. What I was swimming in is this idea of autonomy and trust and knowing the universe. You said that, something like that earlier, Judy. It really struck me that given my life circumstance, I'm having a hard time trusting the universe.
Mm.
And I realize that I'm patterned as a fear-based being. I think that's part of my journey this life. But then I wondered, well, I also feel intense joy and rapture and playfulness, and I love giggling. And so I guess I wanted to ask Prasadji and Judy, if we really are saying that everything is whole, is it really accurate to say the world is joy or the world is kindness? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Prasad?
Judy, can you rephrase Julia's question a little bit? I think I missed some parts of it. Did you understand fully? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
the things got a little distorted. What I heard was, this is particularly what stood out for me, is it's hard for Julia right now to really feel like the universe is a friendly place.
Mhm.
And she was talking about where is autonomy and how does that tie into joy? And I think I might rephrase that, and I don't know, Julia, if this is correct or not, but I might rephrase that is joy a choice?
Excellent question. Excellent. Thank you for clarifying that for me.
Mhm.
There are two things that we face everywhere, I suppose. One is the reality that we experience from the state of mind we operate from. Second is the aspiration that we live into to create the future. The aspiration or intention that we have shapes our experience of reality as it occurs from future to the present moment. But if I only stay with the reality of what I am experiencing right now, that is based on the past. So, to a certain extent, if I can choose, the freedom to choose is probably the only thing that we have that gives human beings a chance of creating the kind of future that they want. So we can make the choice now. And if that choice is optimistic, and if that choice is hopeful, and if that choice is visionary and aspirational and joyful, I think those become the filters through which we look at all the suffering that we and other people can experience, and it might increase the hope and optimism that we have. Okay, to summarize, what did I just say? Joy is definitely a choice. I recommend choose it.
I wrote a song called Choose Joy.
Beautiful. Can you read it?
No, I don't, I would have to look for it,
Sure.
and we're already out of
Maybe
time.
later you can post it to the group. I would love to see that poem again.
I can do that, but the chorus went something like, choose joy, you know, and it just kind of chants, choose joy. So Dinesh, thank you for waiting so long. Please join the conversation.
Thank you so much, Judi and Prasad and everyone else for creating this space in this time where we can really connect and share this wonderful dialogue. When Judi, you made a comment earlier of your journey, it triggered something in me. And now Prasad said that our job should be to embrace the wholeness. And I find that there are a lot of wounded healers in the world who are serving everyone, taking care of everyone. And they want to choose joy, but they're not able to. And my personal journey, what I realized, I was not able to choose joy because I was not ready to embrace my own shadow. I could accept the shadow of the whole world, but not my own shadow. And it took me thanks to one of my colleagues, Mia Atola, she helped me see that I must embrace my fear, my lust, my anything which qualify in that area, shadow side. Once I was able to embrace everything in the wholeness. So embracing our own self in wholeness paves the way to experience that joy, because now we are complete and now we have enough and now we are loved. So when we accept ourselves totally and realizing that fear plays a very important role, it is part of life, and everything we experience in life, the hurt, Rumi all the time says that light enters through your wounds. So realizing that everything which is you perceive from a limited point of view is not working for me or not right. Someone up there is smiling. He says, get ready. This is your next step. So I think if we can get to a point where we can say that things are not going my way, thank you, universe, for showing me the better way, not the my way, which is limited way. And that awareness, then we begin to suddenly explode in self-love. And we embrace and totally accepting ourselves. And then it's easier for us to feel that joy of wholeness, sorrow, and they're just two sides of the same coin. So the bliss, where happiness, sadness, all becomes one. So my question is, that was my journey. And Judi, I picked up something from your journey. Have others also experienced that? And how have they arrived at this idea of embracing the whole? And Prasad, if you have any comment on that, how have you arrived at accepting yourself as a whole? And Prasad and I have known each other for a long time now, more than 30, 40 years. And we have seen each other go through all the challenges and struggles. And Prasad was great help to me when my first wife developed leukemia. And he was extremely helpful in resolving it. And he's also responsible for my second marriage. So Prasad, you have to answer now.
Thank you. I appreciate having you in my life, Dinesh, and many of you, as a matter of fact. I cherish every moment we spend in that context. Now, there are a couple of things that you bring up, which is very important. One is, I go through a lot of emotions just like anybody else. But out of all those emotions, to choose a particular emotion, to choose joy, as one of you put it up, maybe I have free will, but I don't have a choice. The question is, who am I to choose or not choose is a good question. Because if I operate I as an individual identity with certain ego, certain, body and certain experience, then probably I don't have choice. But if I look at it, if I look at myself as a spiritual being with a physical body, my spirit has all the choice it can choose. So who do I identify with? Is it my body? Is it my mind? Or is it my consciousness? I think that is where the conundrum can be broken. Even in the Indian spirituality, the Hindu spirituality, they say, prarabdhaya samarpitam svabhu. Sorry for quoting you Sanskrit for a minute, because this is a precise statement where it says, I can burn away my past sins by choosing myself to be larger than my ego, my identity, my stuff. I think when I can embrace warts and all, I actually begin to accept myself and embrace myself. And then I have a freedom to accept other people. So I'm actually, like Judi and I were talking about, I'm trying to create, just like a Maslow's hierarchy, I'm trying to create ladder of love, like it's layers of love, 6 layers, which I'm talking about. The first layer is first recognizing that I, as an individual, deserves to live, have a voice, and I'm willing to accept, but I am not willing to be subjugated by not only other people's tyranny, my own tyranny of not accepting myself. I think that is where the suffering is too much, even though, whether the pain is there or not, it becomes like continuous living of that experience is not worth it. So we have to choose it. So love is a matter of choice. Joy is experiencing that love in the moment. So that is how I see love and joy to be, very, very interconnected. Because when we love, we experience joy in a multiplied way. And when we experience joy, that means we are in touch with the deep love, not just what we have for ourselves, what the universe has for us and what we have for universe. I think so there is joy is not just what I can make up for myself. When I get into the flow of each of you, when I get into the flow of life, my experience of being in that flow, I call it joy. And being in that flow and experiencing joy, and making it my own is love. That is what is emerging from some of the comments that you have been putting and some of the questions that you are asking. By the way, I never had that formulation like that before. It actually is something that I arrived at. That means we are thinking together, we are playing together, and we are learning together. And so it might have come out of my mouth, but it is as much part of yours as it is mine. So when I listen to you deeply, and when you listen to me, from both our words, life speaks, and the expression of life is love and joy. And thank you very much for that.
It's a beautiful place to conclude this particular conversation. Thank you so much, Prasad. Prasad, you and I have talked about having regular conversations on joy. And so let's do that and invite everybody. if
Yeah.
they want to join us to continue this, which will be outside the Edgewalker Cafe structure. But it's something that we can continue for those who would like to co-create this, something that wants to emerge, that's a higher wisdom that makes all of our lives better. So we'll do that and we'll communicate to you. And I want to let you all know that the next Edgewalker Cafe is July 25th at 11 a.m. Eastern. And the host of that is Kristen Ekins, who is a Edgewalker facilitator. And she is an expert on cultural Edgewalkers, and she's done a lot of incredible cross-cultural work, particularly in the Middle East, but other places. And she is also hosting a journey to the Santiago de Compostela, an Edgewalker journey, to really help people walk on their leading edge and integrate their spirituality as they do this journey. And it'll be in October. If you're new to Edgewalkers, our website is edgewalkers.org, and you can sign up for our newsletter so that you know when future events are happening. And so we'd love to have you come back. This has been very, very powerful and meaningful. Prasad, is there anything you want to share with people before we close this meeting?
Sure. I would like to thank each of you because, you know, I can talk as much as anybody else wants. And, you know, we are all in that profession some way or another. But what was joyful was when it is punctuated by each other's comments, questions, poems, quotes, some of it, I'm going away much more richer, much richer than I have come into this conversation. So it truly became a dialogue between all of us, some of us through your smiles, through your facial expression, through your words. I think I'm going away with a feeling of, you know, richness, spiritual richness, and a joy of sharing this. So if you don't mind, I'll conclude with a prayer again. And this prayer says, we are whole, we are complete, and from that wholeness that the life emerges, and what emerges is again whole and complete. So, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you for lighting my life today.
Namaste. Thank you so much, Prasad. Thank you, everyone.